Today we are going to begin with the virtual choir piece that you heard last week. This is our prelude. We're using this instead of Spirit of Life today. So as you center, we've got a lot of music we're including in the service today. I invite you to make the music a part of your preparation for this big week. You can share that file.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hatred cannot drive out hate. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hatred cannot drive out hate. Only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love, only love, only only love can do that. Only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love, only
So we come together, members, friends, visitors, we come together for a week of milestones. We have in our country, we have the inauguration of a new president every 4 years, and this is that week. Every year, we celebrate the life of Martin Luther King and the values that he brought forward. And it's that week. And while it's not a precise milestone, we are on the cusp of trying to get vaccines distributed, with many trying to secure appointments. And just this week, another impeachment process was started, and the next step to prosecutions all around the Capitol attack was there. So we come with a week of busyness and not always that much we can do about it, but we can prepare. So how might we get ready for a week like this? How might we prepare our heads and hearts? Because that's my hope, is that we spend some time today centering and that we start asking our own questions, our questions that come up through our values about a week like this. And it's not that this week is that different sometimes, because every week we do some of the same work. We bring all of who we are into this circle of connection, and we do the work to try to keep the circle wide. We can think, oh, we're welcoming, it's so easy. It's not always that easy to continually be changing our hearts and staying focused on a bigger picture. It's not about just proclaiming actions. It's not even about just doing them, but it's about that stretch of our heart, that widening of the circle in the totally legit and authentic ways. So we come today to stretch our imaginations. We come curious about all of who is with us both today and in the broader community, and invite everyone who's curious about our congregations or our faith tradition to check us out on the website and chase us down for questions. We want to get to know everyone and keep finding out all about the difference among us, the commonalities, and our shared values. So with that, I ask us all just to take a deep breath. Think of a chalice lighting, whether you are starting to bring your own candle to services. Think of a chalice lighting is that part of centering, that part of inviting one another to pay attention. I light our chalice this morning with words from Samuel Trumbore. O light of life, be kindled again in our hearts as we meet together to celebrate the joy of human community, seeking wholeness that extends beyond us. So I invite you to light a chalice if you have one at home, and I will light the chalice here. Music is a significant part of today's service. It's a part of the African American traditions. It's a part of all traditions. And sometimes we hear music that we've heard in familiarity, but we haven't let it sometimes sink in. And that is part of the invitation of preparation today. So may we hear the music and the lyrics of struggle and hope, imagining the many ways these words are taking into our hearts today, this week. Our opening hymn is We Shall Overcome. It's a version that Ellen and Patty and Dave Moore prepared.
We shall overcome. We shall
Thank you, Patty and Dave and Ellen. Words we hear differently each year. Our thoughts for all ages today, and I always do believe it truly is thoughts for all ages, you're going to hear as almost sort of a kid video. It's a piece prepared by a woman named Leah Morris, and she's working with the Soul Matters team this year. And Soul Matters is a subscription we get through the various UU contacts. And she's picking up on the theme of imagination. And you'll also see her with her own children. And I think she asks in this small piece, it's a very simple piece, I think she challenges us to do the preparation of this week with imagination. So our sharing from Leah Morris.
Who will I be?
Who will I be?
What will I see
What will I see
in this great world?
in this great world?
Who could be free?
Who could be free?
And what will I build?
What will I build?
What will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
The story begins
inside my mind.
inside my mind.
Who will I be?
Who will I be?
And what will I see
What will I see
in this great world?
in this great world?
Who could be free?
Who could be free?
What will I build?
What will I build?
And what will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
Story begins
inside my mind,
inside my mind.
in my imagination.
My imagination.
What is an imagination? Lucy, do you know what imagination means?
I think imagination is what helps people create new things all the time. Because you can't create new things if you can't imagine what you want them to be.
That is absolutely true, Jacob. Everything human made was an idea first. You know, one of my favorite imaginers in history was Leonardo da Vinci. I loved that he imagined that human.
Yay. Thank you. I think that is an example of a place that we stretch our hearts. And as we enter into a time of reflection, a time of prayer, and I ask us to think, where is it we can give? Where is it that we can extend love? Spirit of life, spirit of love. Our prayers this week are pretty simple. We pray for peace. We pray for peaceful transitions. We hold in our hearts all who are in struggle, those who have dealt with the virus, those who have dealt with all sorts of places where their needs have not been met, where the way the breaks have gone, they have been ill. We hold in our hearts all who struggle to have the basic necessities and encourage one another to find in our imaginations a vision of a world where all are included and cared for. But that is part of the stretching of our faith, our challenge. For all that is our lives, we hold this world in gentle embrace today. Amen and blessed be. In both of our congregations, we grow as we share, as we do acknowledgements of the hearts, as we share joys and sorrows. Because we switched locations at a last minute, we're not going to actually light candles, but we are going to go around and have an opportunity for people to share a joy or a concern. As we do this, we are widening our circle. We are growing. We are finding our places of compassion, and we're being reminded of joy, of struggle, and uncertainty. I've already mentioned the first virtual candle we're lighting today for every way that the virus has impacted our country, for the death rate that is just something we could not have imagined last year, that is just as hard, and yet we are called into that imagination. For all the impacts of the pandemic on our communities and our society, we have our first place of acknowledgement this morning.
Beings could fly hundreds of years before we figured out how to do it. And Dr. King is another great imaginer. His speeches about the dream that he had outlined a vision for how people could live better together in this country. It was all about having that vision first, and then finding the words to communicate it, and then being inspired to certain actions that would bring it closer and closer to reality. Do you like to make up stories? When you play with your magnets, or when you play with your babies? That's using your imagination, thinking of stories and characters who are doing things all inside your mind. It's amazing. We have movies playing in our minds all the time. And it's really important to be the director of our movies, to recognize that we can tell ourselves stories that make us feel good or stories that make us feel bad. And we get to choose which thoughts we have. We just have to practice deciding how we use our imaginations. Can you think of something that maybe doesn't exist yet, or that no one has ever seen, but that can make your life better, or make the world better for those of us who are sharing it? I would love to know what kind of ideas you have about how the future could be, and that you're already starting to imagine, and that one day all of us will see. Who will I be?
Who will I be?
And what will I see?
And what will I see?
In this great world,
In this great world,
who could be free?
who could be free?
What will I build?
What will I build?
And what will I find?
What will I find?
My story begins
Story begins
inside my mind,
inside my mind.
in my imagination.
My imagination.
I think it's important that we think locally about the different ways we've used our imagination. And I am privileged now to introduce, each congregation is going to have outreach collections at different times. And this week it's Chester Rivers. And I invite us all, whether you're from the Easton congregation, Chester River congregation, to think in your most generous spirit and to think about what was imagined in Chestertown years ago. We're going to hear a short video from someone who worked on an issue, but first we're going to hear from Chestertown member Amy Warner, who is part of the team that organizes the outreach collections, and she'll give us a little preview. So if we could spotlight Amy, that would be great.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Amy Warner, I'm the co-chair along with Lynn Dollinger of the Social Justice Committee. For the last few years, we have chosen 6 organizations to give to during our church year, and that's our special collection where the whole plate goes to this group. And we'd like to have someone from the organization come and speak to us. It's been very successful and people have been so generous. Our second special collection will go to the winter shelter, which is run by the Samaritan Group in Chestertown. And March, and it was 3 different churches in Chestertown. And Reverend David Ryan is the president of the board of the Samaritan Group. And he is going to give us a quick little overview of what's going on with the winter shelter this year. Just to let you know how to donate, and I encourage everyone to be generous. I'm sure their needs are great. You can donate by sending in a check to the church, mark it for the winter shelter special collection by February 15th, or you can go through the donate link, which is in the newsletter, and also you can find that on the website. But thank you so much for your generosity in the past, and your hopefully your generosity to support this worthwhile group in Chestertown. Thanks.
Hi, this is David Ryan. I have the privilege of being the president of the Samaritan Board of Kent County. We are currently hosting the winter shelter for the months of January, February, and March. In January, it's at the Nazarene Church, and February it'll be at First UMC, and then at the Presbyterian Church in March. All of you know how cold it is in the winter and how vital this ministry is to be able to provide housing for those who are in need. Currently, because of health guidelines and the COVID, we are only able to host about 7 to 8 guests, but those 7 and 8 guests need us. Your support is very much appreciated. We not only fund the winter shelter, but we also fund outreach along with the Good Neighbor Fund and and Salvation Army Group. And they meet every week and meet clients that are in need, and your contributions will also go towards that. Thank you so much for your generous giving. We appreciate every dollar.
Our music before the reading in the sermon today is another piece. Last week we heard Teron Quayles. He is someone who we're really starting to feel a major connection to the congregation. And he sings the music based on the Langston Hughes poem, I Too. I invite us, as we prepare for the sermon, to hear his words and take them into our hearts in fresh ways this week.
They send me to eat in the kitchen when company comes, but I laugh and eat well and grow strong. Tomorrow I'll be at the table. Tomorrow I'll be at the table when company comes. Nobody'll tell, say to me, eat in the kitchen there.
As this week continues, I invite folks, the recording will be up. Replay that music, replay a lot of what you'll hear today over the service, particularly that music. We have a reading today by Todd Cranwell.
Our reading today is from Martin Luther King Jr. These words were part of his acceptance speech he delivered in Oslo, Norway, when he received the Nobel Peace Prize in 1964. I have the audacity to believe that peoples everywhere can have 3 meals a day for their bodies, education and culture for their minds, and dignity, equality, and freedom for their spirits. I believe that what self-centered men have torn down, men other-centered can build up. I still believe that one day mankind will bow before the altars of God and be crowned triumphant over war and bloodshed, and non-violent redemptive good will proclaim the rule of the land. And the lion and the lamb shall lie down together, and every man shall sit under his own vine and fig tree, and none shall be afraid. I still believe that we shall overcome. This faith can give us courage to face the uncertainties of the future. It will give our tired feet new strength as we continue our forward stride toward the city of freedom. When our days become dreary with low hovering clouds and our nights become darker than 1,000 midnights, we will know that we are living in the creative turmoil of genuine civilization struggling to be born.
Thank you, Todd. That last line, we will know we are living in the creative turmoil of a genuine civilization struggling to be born. Reverend Dr. King, he made this speech in 1964, and it was a time of deep challenge in our nation and the world. Negroes, and that was the term he most often used, were not only restricted, but they lived in continual danger and were afraid. Segregation, voting restrictions, housing restrictions were the practice, and in many cases were just allowed by law. The Vietnam War was heating up, and President Kennedy had just been assassinated. He names these times as turmoil and puts the term creative in front of that. He saw it as there was this necessary place that would allow the bringing of a new day. Well, friends, we are living in a time of turmoil, including a very raw period in the aftermath of the assault on the capital of our country. We enter this week with dire security concerns. We've probably secured the Capitol, but there are so many other places of angst and concern in the country. We enter worried about the limitations on vaccines and worrying, where is the true story? Where has the process been managed? What is going on? I just can't quite get to that place of calling it creative turmoil yet. I hope to get there soon, but I'm not quite feeling it yet, because I think we yearn to imagine that possibility. We want to actually feel, and I always go into these feeling places because I think you need to feel a national turning. I want to make space. I don't want to rush my own head and heart and pretend I'm feeling it when I'm not quite there yet. I think we are there. While we wait for that authentic feeling, I sense we're invited to just pay deep attention. We're still in a waiting mode. In fact, I found myself rereading the sermon about Advent when we lit the Advent wreath, and I'm used to preaching about waiting before the holidays. And yet that is the feeling I sense we have today. So my hope is that we can prepare to witness this historic week, that we can be ready to listen really well and pay attention. As we hear the various speeches from MLK this week and we watch the rituals of transition, knowing that they're going to be curtailed, they're not what we are used to, they're going to feel different with barricades and so much security. As all that is going on, what will we be looking for? What will we, how will people be quoting us years from now as we watch both our leaders and ourselves try to get a clear vision for the choices we're making, the priorities we're setting, the decisions about resources? What is it we're going to look for this week? Because I think in addition to centering ourselves and remembering that we all have different experiences, that might be our mission for today. So I have a couple big questions that are in my head and heart, but I ask you to form your own. So my first one is around the role of government. I can't imagine we're all going to agree here as to what the federal government or the state government or everybody should do. It would be actually shocking if we did. It wouldn't be the group I want to be with. But what are we going to hear about the role of government? I know, at least I'm yearning to hear about it returning to a place of function. I want to know what government's doing. But I think something is even deeper than that. As we're forming our stories, if we go back to Lee Morris, as we're forming the stories in our head, sometimes I think there's this narrative, I'll call it a false narrative, that folks think if you want functioning government that's caring and looking at some safety nets in lots of different ways that can be done, the trade-off is therefore there'll be less liberty. There's a journalist and historian, I think quite a few folks have been reading a lot of lately. Her name is Heather Cox Richardson, and she reminds us that if you go all the way back to the 1800s, the minute folks wanted to somehow redistribute wealth, maybe to build highways, to build hospitals, anytime that started happening, the caution was you're going to annihilate our liberty. It's always been a reaction. And I don't think it's necessarily a helpful one, nor is it a trade-off that needs to be made. It's not an annihilation of liberty to care for all. I think it's a false narrative if we let that be the priority. What might we think of when we hear that term freedom in all the speeches that we hear? Is it the freedom that we each have to do stuff? My personal freedom, my ability to put signs up in my lawn? Or is it the freedom from, I'll say bondage, but all the things that have rippled out through that over the years where people have not been able to partake because someone is restricting their very essence of being, their ability, the spirit of their spirit has been constrained. I don't think that comes in any one category, but I think MLK's Nobel Prize speech, when he was giving the speech that Todd just read, in one sentence, he talks about dignity, equality, and freedom in one sentence. How do we work to both have freedoms and equity and have that lifting us all and to be real? I think we need to listen to many voices this week, and I hope both in the leadership picture we see as we look at how people are describing the role of government, we're asking good questions. I also hear that we need to be listening closely about issues of race and racism. They were front and center for us this summer. Tehran actually prepared that piece for us when we did the Artists for Justice, the service on the Artists for Justice. Lots of protests happening, but I think we're called to see if we're still paying attention, and we're hearing not only specifics on dismantling race and racism, but if it is becoming part of a broader culture change of how we make decisions and set priorities. In another reading from Dr. King, in his letter from the Birmingham jail, King noted, We know through painful experience that freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor. It must be demanded by the oppressed. And he goes on, frankly, I have yet to engage in a direct action campaign that was, quote, well-timed in the view of those who have not suffered unduly from the disease of segregation. For years now, I have heard the word wait. It rings in the ear of every Negro with piercing familiarity. This wait has always meant never. We must come and see with one of our distinguished jurists that justice too long delayed is justice denied. I think that letter back to 1963 feels predictive. And I think this is more than just looking at our government, looking beyond us. I know as Unitarian Universalists, we have been doing soul searching about how our own institution, how our own congregations are part of those messages on wait and delay and caution and not quite now. You're going to hear over the next couple of years a lot about something being called the eighth principle. There's a thought that maybe we should expand our principles to be much more explicit on our commitment to anti-racism, to the addressing all oppressions, and to hold not only our institutions, our own congregations, the UU, but to hold ourselves accountable. There's a lot of debate, how specific do you want it, and all this kind of things. But I offer that as part of our lens as we prepare this week. What is it that we are called to do to be not only specific on anti-racism and anti-oppression work, but to change long-term mindsets? One of the things that gave me hope this week, and I wished I had written it down when I was driving along, but they were interviewing one of the appointees to the new administration. And she was asked about climate change. And she said, yeah, there'll be some specific policies, we'll roll some stuff out, but climate change can't be a narrow policy. It has to be a mindset. You should be hearing about climate change in all that we do. My mind went to think of, oh, how we educate our kids, how we look at science, how we prioritize research, how we look at healthcare. I think the work of anti-racism, the work of anti-oppression needs to be at that same level. I know I'll be watching. Am I hearing it as a consistent message through it all? The third thing, and I only have three really that I'm thinking through here, is probably for me the most important. What am I hearing about the mindset around truth telling? What am I seeing that helps us recover in integrity with our government? There was one example I saw this week, I think it was Biden, but it could have been somebody else, gave a speech. And the journalist said, I want to fact check that. And they said, come on in, please help us fact check it. Those are the signals, the places of culture that I know I am hoping to have some restored faith in our broader system, in our broader democracy. My final thought is, as we prepare for this week, as we discuss this with our friends and we are on social media and we are doing all the things that people do in 2021 during inauguration, I think the words we both say to ourselves and the ones particularly that we say out loud matter. If we find ourselves in pretty much any scenario thinking of we and they, anytime we hear ourselves doing that, I do it, I'm sure a lot of folks do it, I advise us to pay attention to that too. I do think we need to be calling folks into accountability, but my hope is that we do that with specificity. If there is a person's views or an institution's views that you don't like, be specific about that. Write the letters, get out there, get your voices out and do that important, hard work. I think that's where we can be clear, we can be brave, And we can be part of some sort of a turning we're yet to imagine. But I do ask us, I caution us to avoid any generalizations and labels and stereotypes. I don't think we know what others believe or their motivations. We need to act, we need to be really clear on what we think are civil rights and values and all the stuff, and I hope we are the loudest advocates we can be out there. But I also think we need to make some space to be surprised. I don't want folks to think of me as, because I'm a UU minister in a certain tradition, therefore they know everything I think. And I want to give that grace to others. So as we head into this week, I sense we're going to miss the rituals. It's sad, we're going to miss seeing it the same way. But I ask us to hold those feelings honestly, to know when you're sensing a feeling of possibility. I think there is an excitement this week. There is the possibility that comes with something new. I think there's the hopes for civility. There's the hopes of a life less limited by COVID. I think we're on some cusp. I think we're invited to walk together this week and imagine what Dr. King called us back to years ago, to consider creative turmoil. It's going to take time, my friends. It will take imagination. And my prayer is that we have careful preparation in our hearts and minds, and we pay attention this week. May it be so. Our final hymn today, and then we do have some music at the end as the postlude, is I looked for a version of Lift Every Voice and Sing that would fit for today in our virtual world. The one I found was out in California. It's by a college a cappella choir, and I reached out and said, can we have permission to use it? And they said, sure. Just make a donation to some folks that you know are doing good racial justice. Take it with our love. And so we offer this by the Stanford Talisman as our final hymn today. It's a hymn that I think we all need to listen to the words very closely.
Civil rights activist James Weldon Johnson wrote Lift Every Voice and Sing as a poem, which was set to music by his brother John Roseman Johnson in 1899. The song is now known as the Black National Anthem in America. It is a protest, a hymn, and a prayer of profound significance for our people. We lift every voice and sing to express ourselves. We lift every voice to show that we have strength in numbers and we will not be silent. We lift every voice and sing to be lifted, liberated, and free.
Freedom, the power to determine action without restraint. Freedom, the absence of or release from ties, obligations, or restrictions. Freedom, the ease or facility of movement or action. Freedom, frankness or boldness in manner or speech. Freedom, a political right. Until we are all free, none of us is free. Black lives matter. Black lives matter. Black lives matter.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring. Ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound down as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun, let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, lives in the days when hope unborn had died. Yet with a steady beat, have not our weary feet come to the place for which our fathers sighed. We have come over a way that with tears has been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star stands. God of our weary ears, God of our silent tears, thou who hast brought us thus far on the way, thou who hast by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path we pray. Oh, let's not be straight from what God where we met. Hearts drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
That is our place of centering those young voices. Hear them. In a moment, I'll extinguish the chalice. But I think that is our week. Our week is to be in witness, to be in care. I encourage everybody to watch the newsletter for announcements. Particularly want to highlight the reading of the Easton Congregation of Becoming Nicole, and that will be actually in an Easton specific service on February 7th. Check with Jane Terraby or Mary Lou Malone for any details. So excited there. And Chestertown also is doing a reading. You'll be hearing that. Keep an eye on the newsletter. Watch for outreach. Keep up your pledges. Keep up your support of the congregations. I think those are the announcements to focus on today. I did see one congregation who's starting to actually post them sort of in a list or a PowerPoint. We may try something like that. But that is our week, the specifics of our congregation and that need to lift every voice. So we extinguish the chalice, and in a moment we will have our postlude. I encourage you to stay for the postlude. And then it will become coffee hour. We understand some folks may drop off, and we'll continue our shared conversations there. And next week we will have a guest in our pulpit, and it will be a pre-recorded service. Correct, Annie? Not a Zoom service. Checking with Annie Lavin. Pretty sure that's right. But that will be a pre-recorded service. You'll be able to watch that by Sunday morning, but it will be back in that format. So we extinguish this chalice in the simplicity of love, care for one another, and care for our community and our country. We can now share our postlude piece.